Sheri, Ready with Sheri, the viral Instagram queen.
I think this time last year, I was still sitting about maybe 3,000 followers. And as of, I think this morning, I've cracked 18K, which is crazy, right? Which is crazy growth. I know it sounds so cliche, but consistency. It's like you've got to know your stuff and take your mind off of the followers. When it comes to, in terms of actually then like growing audience, having hooks is really important and prioritizing the hooks piece is really key. Mine will probably just be being really authentically present on your stories. People are consuming your content because they actually want your support or they want some kind of benefit of following you. Give that to them.
Hey coach, Xenia Wood here, and this is the Swift Coaches Academy podcast, created for service-based business owners who are ambitious enough to break free from the forever hustle and create scalable businesses that truly make an impact while also giving us freedom. With more than a decade of experience, we're not here to waste your time on theory. Instead, just sharing what works and what doesn't to help you get clear as fuck on your next move and show you exactly how to implement the systems and strategies that you need to scale with confidence. I am super pumped for our episode today. Sheri, Ready with Sheri. How are you going?
I'm so well. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Oh, me too. So for context, Sheri and I are part of the same like business coaching program as students. And honestly, I feel like there are so many incredible people inside that coaching program. And just like I feel like by osmosis, we're all leveling up, which is awesome. But you are, I wrote down in my notes, the viral Instagram queen. Um, but also your business in food relationship coaching and binge expert, obviously not now binging, but supporting people to stop that. Can you talk to us about how you like we want to talk about the Instagram and how to get better at that and things like that. But before we do that, talk to me about how you sort of fell into coaching food and relationship because it's kind of different to nutritionist and things like that, right?
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. Um, so very binge and emotional eating specific. So I used to be a really heavy binge eater and I spent about 8 years stuck in a binge restrict cycle. And I saw all of the different health professionals did all the sort of like quote unquote like right things initially, seeing like a dietitian and nutritionist and thinking I needed to go down the food route and thinking it was a food issue. And then went and spent a lot of money on like therapy and counseling and all this stuff and just feeling completely out of control. And then eventually just realized that this was so much more to do with my mindset and about these emotions that I wasn't dealing with. It was so centered around self-sabotage. And there was just so much leaky behavior with my food that actually had nothing to do with like Oreos. Like I wasn't addicted to Oreos. I was actually just feeling mentally and emotionally a certain kind of way, and food became my cope. And so after about 8 years, I just completely unsubscribed from everyone and everything, and then did like deeper self-development work, actually dove into the neuroscience behind binge eating and what's actually going on a deeper level, and then finally actually dealt with my emotions and understood why I was leaning on food to cope. And then was able to exit my binge restrict cycle, ended up losing about 20 kilos as a result of that because I'd become quite overweight from my binge restrict cycle. And then once I'd broken free, I was really open about that on my own podcast, and was then able to realize like people just started coming out of the woodworks on my Instagram, on the podcast, and whatever, just saying that they had been stuck the exact same way that I had been for a long time, and they never really understood why. And that's when I started coaching, and that was about 5-6 years ago now, and now full-time job. And primarily is all sort of lead gen is through Instagram, and that's how people come and find me to finally break free from their binge eating.
Wow. And like 8 years, I feel like is such a long time. And just like from your perspective, if you had to put like a rough percentage on it, because I think this, and I'm like binge eating is like 100% emotional, right? Like, or are there some people who it's like actually they're addicted to sugar?
Great question. I would say, well, with the women that I work with, it is absolutely emotional and mindset driven. For sure, there's a degree, right? If we're stuck in a binge restrict cycle and someone's under eating, and this is why there's always a degree. There's like sort of 3 pillars in my program where we focus on food, mindset, emotions. So biggest thing we focus on first is getting food right, because if we're right, like I always say, like if we're under eating or we're not actually having wholesome nutrition, and we're not actually, focusing on fullness and actually, properly giving ourselves proper protein, like basic things, then it's no wonder that we're probably feeling pretty food focused, whether it's because we're not honoring cravings, we're not eating enough food, we're over exercising, whatever it might be. So getting that down pat firstly is really important. But then from there, it's like more often than not, people are still binging, people are still overeating. And that's when it's like, it's all mindset and or emotions, understanding your self-sabotage, understanding your habits, understanding how to actually rewire your brain patterns. It's like, once you actually do that deeper work, that's when you can really create food freedom and tap back into your state of peace and calm and control.
I love that. That's awesome. And so 6 years as a coach is a decent chunk of time, which is, but like, I feel like from my understanding, your Instagram stuff has kind of rapidly accelerated only like semi recently. Can you talk to me about like what shifted for you and like how that change progressed?
Totally. Yeah. Yeah. It's actually really interesting to reflect back on it because I, for a long time, right, people thought that the coaching that I was doing, I only had like 1,000 or 2,000 followers at the time, but was still able for it to be almost to a point of full-time, as a full-time role. Because I was still working corporate at the time a couple of years ago. And it's just because the people that still found my page, it was quite potent. Obviously, what I do is quite niche, and so was still able to create a business from that. But then yeah, so since I think this time last year, I was still sitting about maybe 3,000 followers, and as of I think this morning, I've cracked 18K, which is crazy, right? Which is crazy growth. Yeah, and it's really been over the last sort of 3 months that it's gone from 10K to 18K, which has been a huge growth as well. And I think like there's so many things I can speak to around this. I kind of like, I don't know if I should hand it back to you in terms of questions, but in terms of like how that's happened, there's so many like kind of various components to that. But a huge piece is, I would just like, it sounds so cliche, but consistency. It's like you've got to know your staff and take your mind off of the followers and just focus on value, like give value and keep preaching your message, because people are out there and you need to put yourself in that space to make sure that they can find you. And when you're consistent, yeah, there's so many things I can talk about in terms of going viral, but that's probably the first piece.
Yeah, totally. I think like definitely one of my questions that I had off the back of that is like how to stay consistent. And I know that you spoke when we met at the retreat in Bali, you spoke about obligation and sort of the shift of mindset of Instagram, because I think so many people have this very like heavy ugh feeling when it comes to it. So I think before we dive into like the tactics and the strategies, can you talk to me about how you approach it from a mindset perspective to make it feel good and light and fun?
Totally. Yeah, um yeah, firstly, I think it's coming from a place of duty, right? Where it's like I owe it to every woman, and I'll say it from my business perspective, but I owe it to every woman that wants to break free from her binge restrict cycle. I owe it to her for me to actually put out my services and actually share content from a place of, I don't want any woman being stuck in a binge restrict cycle, waking up today feeling hopeless. I want her to stumble across my content so that she reads a caption and goes, oh my God, I'm not alone. Oh my God, there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And because I come from a place of like, my mission is to make sure that any woman that ever wants to break free from binging is able to do that and knows that she does not have to stay stuck. She knows that she can reclaim control, because that is so deeply rooted as like my mission and my entire drive of my business. It makes putting out content, even when it feels difficult to stay consistent or it feels like heavy in any way, the way to flip that is going, well, someone out there needs my content. And being in the position that I'm in, I like, it comes from a full place of service, which means that the resistance comes down and it comes to like, this is just what I have to do. And it comes in from a place though of desiring to do that as well. Which yeah, it coming from a place of that duty.
I think that when you spoke about that the first time I heard it, there were so many people in the room who were like, oof, that like hit me really hard. And obviously you have a ton of clarity on the mission and the outcome that you're working towards. And I think sometimes, particularly probably when we get into businesses in general, it's like, oh, well, I like exercise, or, I like, writing programs or whatever it is. And so it's from a place of like you centric rather than like the service of others. And I totally see that in people who have a ton of success in business. It's no longer about like what me. It's about like what can I do? How can I give value? And I love that you mentioned that before in terms of like your content is value focused and like effectively who you were 8 years ago and what you needed to hear in that moment.
Yeah.
Which kind of leads me to, I think one of the things I notice is really compelling. And by the way, I get like all my students to follow you. I'm like, you need to just watch for like how she crafts this together because it's just so potent. And I think what I see a lot of people doing wrong, and you might be able to speak to this too, is that they're speaking to like current clients or they think that everyone already knows them. And so when you're putting out a piece of content, who are you, like if you had to have a persona or an ideal client that you're, or potential client, like a lead that you're speaking to, who is that? What stage are they in? And how do you know like what like compelling language to use? Because I feel like some people get stuck and they just post like, oh, this is how to do a back squat, or, you know, and it's like, whoa, back up. Like that's 3 steps too far, at least.
Totally. Yeah. There's a couple of different trains of thought with that, but I think it's such a great question. So I think knowing who you're speaking to is super important, and being able to adjust the way like your language according to, I always think about like different avatars, right? So I think about it like I've got like, 'cause not every woman that comes into my program is in the exact same position. They've got a lot of similarities, right? But some of them are mums, some of them are young girls, some of them are like the corporate gal that goes to the gym and knows no gym results, and that's kind of her main pain point. Some women have just stayed stuck in for the last 20 years, 30 years, and so they're feeling a bit more defeated as opposed to the younger corporate gal who is like, I'm such a go-getter, I can do this. Like people are kind of in different headspaces. So when I'm creating a piece of content, I just make sure that even if I think about it across the span of a week or a month, that I'm speaking to various people within that content. So I don't really have like a strategy for that. It's just making sure that when I am creating content, I'm thinking about like, who have I recently been speaking to, which oftentimes ends up being people that actually jump on clarity calls with me. And I can see a pattern of that. Like, oh, I've got like a big influx of like mums at the moment. Okay, great. That's because I've been speaking to that kind of content. And then noticing that if I'm wanting to then make sure, especially my program, I always like there to be a mix of different people so that mindsets are all different so people can like come and self like nurture within the program. But then I also think about, okay, great. Like, when was the last time that I spoke to that corporate gal who is a complete go-getter, who knows she can do this? And then really making sure that I just kind of tweak my messaging and tailor it to that. And I think that's really where the benefit of being able to really practice putting yourself in the position of said avatar. So I tend to try and keep it simple for myself. I tend to have like 3 or 4 people that are like ideal clients, and they're not even ideal clients. They're just like the kind of women that I really love to work with, that are genuinely at different stages, but they all have that same goal of feeling stuck for a long time, having a degree of self-doubt, but also truly know that in order to show up as the best mum, to show up as the best in their relationship, to actually progress their career, they're very aware that this needs to be solved and that they've wasted time and they don't want to waste any more time. I always speak to that same sort of underlying pain point that like they need to get out of this because that they desire to. So making sure that I'm speaking to those different avatars, but then I really make sure that I practice getting into that headspace. So I always make sure that I have like a particular content day, usually about once a week or so, where I will literally just sit down and I really make sure that I'm sitting in that energy of like, okay, like how did that feel? Like the only one that because I'm not a mum, but I feel like I can pop into that space because I've worked also with enough mums. It's like being able to pop into that headspace of going, okay, even if I'm not a mum, it's like I'm a sister and I'm a nurturer in my family. Okay, the same thing applies. Can I look at the people that rely on me? Can I look at if I'm really just getting myself in that headspace, what would I be feeling physically, mentally, emotionally? And then being able to really speak to the pain points and then being able to speak to what they're actually wanting to feel as well. And just making sure that I tailor my language to that. And it's something I think that naturally over time, you just get better and better and better at doing. And right, if you're coming from a place of mission, I think you never actually have to fake it. Like you actually can tap into understanding if you truly understand someone's pain point and you also truly understand where they want to be, that can then you just get better at allowing that to flow through the way that you articulate yourself in your content. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I find that really interesting that you actually have like 4 kind of different avatars, but the thing that sort of hit for me is like there's that mutual pain point problem where they're at in their stage.
Mm.
And I think that that's really important to address because sometimes we probably think about like our current clients or where they're at, right? And usually they're a couple steps ahead of the people who we probably want to be speaking to on Instagram or platforms where we're trying to attract leads. We're not trying to nurture current clients. I think that's something that often gets missed. And so that's why I find a lot of coaches don't hit the mark. They're not
And
speaking to the problem and what people felt before they joined your program rather than like what they feel now that they've like just started.
such a good point. I absolutely agree. And I think even if I think about like my own growth recently, it's getting better at speaking to the people that are still in stage one, where it's like
Mm.
it's so focusing on more like awareness content, right? And as opposed to like it's like awareness and education content, as opposed to oh, I guess it's a kind of a bit of a mix, like education, a bit of like inspo content as well, as opposed to just going straight in for almost like speaking specifically to even binging. It's like, at least for myself and my niche, it's like sometimes people aren't even aware that they're binge eating, or they're not really wanting to acknowledge that they have that problem yet, but they are super aware of how is that manifesting in their life right now. It's manifesting by their clothes feeling tighter, them waking up every single day feeling anxious to go to brunch with their girlfriends, them, always ordering the long black instead of the oat cappuccino that they actually want to get, and them thinking about their next 10 snacks every single second. It's like that's what they're aware of. They're not aware that they have a binge eating issue right now. They just
Mm.
know that they can't be consistent and they're blowing out. So if I'm speaking to binge eating alone and I'm like, stop binge eating, and this is how you stop binge eating, it might kind of land, but they're not really going to feel seen and heard by me, right? They are going to feel seen and heard by me if I'm speaking to the fact that, hey, I also used to be that girl that her clothes were getting tighter. She wasn't able to go out for brunch. She couldn't hold a steady relationship. She was super erratic. She went to the gym and didn't see results for 8 years. It's like people are like, holy crap, that's me. Oh, who is this
Mm.
person? Then they can actually, what my education content can actually land when I'm then speaking about binging, and then they feel seen and heard. So it actually allows them to feel sort of self-nurtured within my content and on my page.
I find that so interesting. And something else that you like really tapped into then that I love about your content is how specific you are with like what they're feeling. You're not like, oh, they're feeling like they lack confidence and they're feeling like a bit average and maybe they don't feel great today. You're like, they ate 17 peanut butter slices when they wanted one, right? And I think that like I love that. And I like to lean this towards like Taylor Swift analogy. Obviously being a Swiftie in terms of like her songs are not like, oh, I met a boy, I'm a girl, it's great. She's like, he wore a gray shirt, I wore a red dress. We walked down this street wearing in a Maserati, and like it's
I actually
so
love that. That's such a good way to view it. I love the Taylor Swift. Yep.
well, like I think it's because the thing that I hear from students who are like trying to do this is they're nervous because they're like, well, but what if people don't eat peanut butter? Or, but what if people don't have a red dress? Or what? And so they get so caught up in the details. Yet, the reason I call it the Taylor Swift analogy is because everyone relates to her stories if you are a woman, just full stop, really, in some way, shape, or form. And the details I find don't matter. Like you can still put yourself in the position if you don't have a red dress and your dress was blue, right? Can you speak a little bit more to like why you do that specifically and how you have maybe overcome being like, oh, like, but what if someone's allergic to peanut butter? Then they're going to be put off my content.
Totally. That's such a good point. Absolutely. Yeah. So I definitely, I'm never, I always think about how can I go deeper? Always. So that by the end, and it's again, it's something that you get good at, I think. So now when I write a caption, naturally that comes to me. Whereas before, whatever, 5 years ago, it probably was a bit more like, you know, you overate at breakfast. It's like, okay, well, what does that look like? If I'm sitting there with someone overeating at breakfast, what does that look like? Okay, it looks like having a bowl of granola and then having another bowl of granola because you feel guilty for it, and then feeling like you're really food focused, and then you feel anxious since you have the entire packet of granola. And so it's like, okay, well, if I know that that's something that my girls would be struggling with, I'm actually going to say that in the content. And it's like, even if it's not granola, even if they're someone that binges on 5 pieces of Nutella toast, they also know the feeling that I'm speaking about, right? And that's also a part of it, right? It's like when I think about, or when I speak about, let's say, what's a better example maybe, or I'll use the granola example. Let's say you've had 3 bowls of granola, and I'll actually say you're sitting there and you've just had 3 bowls of granola instead of just having the one. It's being able to tap into the emotional piece. So somewhere in that content, somewhere in there, I will chat to them actually feeling now anxious for their day ahead. And now they're feeling really calorie focused. And now they're trying to do like calorie gymnastics of like, how can I mitigate, undo the damage from this? And I'm speaking about what I know would be the ramifications of that action, right? So that even if someone is going to have 5 slices of Nutella toast and feel super guilty, they're still going to resonate with the next piece of the content where I'm saying the ramifications of that action, where now they're superfood focused, they're going to work, second guessing if they should have lunch. And so they're like, oh my God, this is me. So even though they haven't, maybe they don't like granola bowls, but they do understand that, like, holy crap, this is how it leaks out into the rest of my day. So I always speak to that. And I think it comes back to like, can you paint the picture? Right. And thinking about, if you were watching this on a TV, what would I be watching? Right. Because I think that's really where it's like, yeah, okay, that person could be having a granola bowl, or they could be having a piece of toast, or they could be having a packet of chips, or like whatever. But that person, what's the next steps? Like what are the outcomes of that behavior that's just happened? I think that's what people really tap into. And that's what I'm very emotive about with my language, is like, okay, the rest of the day, like your hunger cues are off, you're feeling brain fog, you're unsure about what to now wear to work, everything's feeling tight, even though you know that you like probably look no different. You feel like everyone's eyes are on you. Everyone knows what that feels like, right? And that, so speaking to that very potently, I think allows people that, yeah, if they don't connect on the first piece, they're still going to connect with the entire body of it.
Mm. I find that that's such an interesting point. It's like similar to how you have multiple ideal clients, they still come back to the same pain point, the same problem. And you've clearly over time, right? This is not like, oh, I just woke up and I'm great at copywriting or I know exactly what to say. But I love that you sit in the feeling of that ideal client and go, what am I feeling? What are my pain points? What are my problems? And you play out the scenario of like what that looks like in a day, in a month, in a year for them if they continue to go down this, I guess, pathway that they are. Um, to flip it and sort of change a little bit more now and talk about like the anatomy of like an Instagram post or a reel or things like that. What do you want anyone to know who's like, I'm doing Instagram, but like I'm just kind of doing it? How, like, what do you make sure every post has? Like, we all have heard about like the hook and whatever, but like, do you have a specific um anatomy that you create? Every post must have these couple of things.
Mm, really, really good point. So I think, yeah, because there's different kind of content, and I try and hit various elements of that, because not everyone, like, I'm not really someone that watches reels. Like, that's not really the kind of content that I consume on Instagram. But I'm someone that like will go through carousel posts. But not everyone is a carousel post kind of person. Some people love reels, right? So I think it's about understanding that you want to be hitting various elements of it, right? Even like, so now I have like talking head reels that are more education based. And then I also have like B-roll reels. So I've got different styles. Some people love, like, they come on there and they want to like educate. But then sometimes, right, people just want to like watch me eat a sandwich and there's like a good book on there, like, and then they can read the caption, right? Everyone kind of wants something a little bit different. So I think it's always like a mixed bag of favorites. Like, you want to have a whole bunch of different stuff there so that whoever's kind of landing on the page, they're able to connect with something, right? Like, I always, again, coming from a place of service, it's like, I want anyone that's landing on my page, it's obviously because they're actually struggling, and I want there to be a piece of content there that's going to land for them. So it's like, I need to have a mixed bag because everyone consumes different kind of content. So if I come from that lens, it then means that I guess in the sense of like sometimes like static posts or carousel posts, like pretty simple. Like, I'll always just have a potent caption there. Usually those ones are like less lengthy, and I'll try and just make sure that like in the static post or in the carousel post, there's just like it's as potent as possible, right? Like, people don't need to be reading huge long stories. Again, some people do that kind of content, but usually I'll just have something that's like very like factual, and that's because also part of my content, as much as it's nurturing, it's also no BS, right? Because people, at the end of the day, people don't want, or I don't want to attract the kind of people that are just wanting motivation. I want people to be like, wow, I can see this is a problem and it's something that I need to solve. So that's the person that I'm speaking to. So usually those ones are very much no BS, take back your control, whatever. But when it comes to in terms of actually then like growing audience, definitely then prioritizing reels. And I think that's when having hooks is really important, and prioritizing the hooks piece is really key. And so I think from like the anatomy piece, I think it's about making sure like, so yeah, B rolls and then talking head reels, like they're kind of like the two reels that I make. And I think it's really important. Like we have all heard that the hook is really important. But at the end of the day, it's like if you're scrolling on Instagram, like the first thing that you read, your brain is literally going, is this for me? Is it not for me? Right. So I think I always look at it through the lens of like, it's going to land for the people that it's going to land with, and it's not going to land for the people that it's not going to land with. And yes, as much as I want eyeballs on my content, I also want the right eyeballs on my content. Like I don't want this to land with the wrong audience, because and I've had a couple of reels go viral that I just had an influx of the wrong kind of people that were just very wanting to lose weight. And that's like, there's no point going viral if that's what you're going to pull in, right? You want to pull in the right kind of people. So making sure that you actually have the right kind of hook is actually really important. And then making sure that you actually back it up with a caption that is also potent and tailored towards the people that you want. Because yeah, there's no point going viral if then everyone in your audience is not the right kind of people. You may as well have 2,000 followers, and for that to be a potent audience, as opposed to 20,000 followers and they're all the wrong kind of people that are following you. So I think yeah, it's making sure you have a great hook, and then a potent caption that then is very emotive. And then I would just always say like a CTA, so some kind of call to action where you're asking. There's some kind of, not even asking, but you're offering. There's some kind of thing for them to do, so that if someone actually does land, there's either a link in bio, like you're telling people to go link in bio. Like people want to be directed, right? Like you don't want to be reading something like, oh, this lands, and you're like, what should I do next? You want to be able to go like, oh, I can book in for a call. Oh, I can go to her stories and ask for a masterclass. Oh, I can comment something here and she's going to send me something if I want to. Like helping people, like nurture them into your funnel. And I always say, like, I think people can have this resistance of doing that, because they're like, oh, but I don't want to, like, whatever. I'm like, it's again coming from a place of duty. People are consuming your content because they actually want your support, or they want some kind of benefit of following you. Give that to them, right? People don't have to opt in for my masterclass, but if they'd like to, they can. And so pop that in the caption, or pop that in the text on top of your B-roll. Like tell people what to do next if they actually do want support, because no one's going to opt in if they don't want to, but give them the offer.
I love that. I think like tell them what to do as like next steps if someone's ready for it. Like otherwise people are like, oh, cool, great content. And then they like move on and they might forget and things like that. It's kind of like, I remember when we were in Bali, one thing that really stuck out to me. Anyway, stood out. Yeah, we'll go with that. Stood out to me was that like all the Balinese were like always selling, just like all day, every
Yes.
day. They were like, buy my thing, I'll do this, I'll add this value piece, or whatever. They often lent into like discounts and things like that, which I, not sure that that's always the best option. But I was just seeing how hungry they were, and how like there is no like, oh, I'm just going to think about it and this and that. And, perhaps it is because like this is their livelihood and they don't make sales and they can't like feed their family and stuff. And so I think we've got like a huge luxury of being like, oh, like you don't have to do this, or this is, not as detrimental if I don't do this. But I think when you shifted it to the service and being like, hey, if someone actually needs help, and something that reminds me, I sort of say a similar thing where I ask anyone, my clients or anyone listening, to think about like a client whose life they really changed, right? And I'm like, who is that person? Like, give me their name. Like, let's go through it. And for me, it's one of my clients called Hixie. And he came to me and had like, and this is when I was doing rehab, and had like huge, like really, really bad back pain. He was like depressed. He was on prescription opioids. Like he was really struggling. And he worked with me, I think, for 2 years. I've already got goosebumps. But the thing for me was that like, in that time and towards the end, he like was able to go from like I can barely leave my house to like this is the single hour of my week where I get value, and then turned around and was like, I don't know if I'd still be here like alive if it wasn't for you. And I was like, holy, like I can almost like I'm a little watery eyes right now just thinking about it because it's so powerful for me. And then I get people to use that and go, imagine if your next post could bring in the next version of that person, but you decided not to post it. And I'm like, oof, like that for me is kind of like the service element, but um same thing to what you're saying, right? Is that we've got to make it about them, not about us in
Yeah.
whatever way we can.
I love that so much. And like even as you say that, I'm like, oh, I really I totally can resonate with that because it's if you knew that the next piece of content was literally going to change someone's life, and you knew that like, without a God complex, but being able to go like even in my own niche, right? Like sometimes it can get so bad where people feel so out of control that like even for myself, right? Like there's a very dark period where I was very much at the bottom of the pit of my binge eating. And it's like I wish someone could come in and save me in that moment. And it's like choosing to to really operate from the perspective of that duty and that service and going like, you get to do this. Like you get to put out your content and you get to support someone. And if you knew that the next lead that was going to come in was someone that was the right kind of person, that was literally here for all the right reasons and genuinely needed your support, you'd put out content like that. Like you wouldn't
Mm.
second guess yourself. You wouldn't be like, is this perfect? God knows, like the majority of the stuff that I put out, even and like once you like I think so many people, yeah, like, oh, this caption's not perfect. Oh, this B-roll's not perfect. Oh, I don't look my best in this one. Oh, I didn't say the exact perfect thing that I should have on that talking head reel. It's like, just put out the content. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter because it will land with someone, right? And I think that speaks to what we were saying earlier in terms of consistency. I do not try and be perfect. I like, there are definitely things that I watch back over and I'm like, totally could have articulated that 10 times better. And that could have been half the length of that talking head reel because I tend to chat, but it's, being able to go, but that's okay because it's going to land for the right kind of person and I'm going to get better and I will articulate it better next time. It doesn't really matter. It's about like, can I get it 90% right, 80% right, and be able to just put out a little bit more? Right? This is where like the perfect balance of like quality over like what like
Quantity.
yes, thank you. It's like we being able to find that good balance, but don't hold yourself back just because it's not perfect. Be willing to again operate from a place of service, but still put out a steady pace of content. That there's no point trying to wait till it's like 99% perfect because you'll literally your Canva templates will be like chockers and you just won't have downloaded anything and scheduled anything, and you may as well just start putting out that content and you will naturally get better at it. And yeah.
Preach. I talk about this so much in terms of people like, oh, like I want to be perfect or whatever. And I'm like, cool, cool, cool. Remember the first time you went into the gym and like squatted with a barbell? Like, was that perfect? And they're like, no. And I'm like, cool, cool, cool. Like, how long have you been squatting for or doing whatever the thing is? And they're like, 5 years. I'm like, awesome. So that's probably how many reps it's going to take. And so you have to be okay with being a beginner. And being a beginner doesn't mean that you suck. It doesn't mean that you're bad. It just means that you're learning something new and you can't get to, I kind of talk about this with the iPhone. I'm like, you can't get to iPhone 14 without iPhone 1, right? Like
Yes.
the first iPhone, even though like, it functioned, it did what it was supposed to do and it had the main points in it, but it wasn't what it is now. And you can't create iPhone 14 first. You have to start at number one. And I think because we see oftentimes like people who are so far ahead of us, we're comparing like our day one to their day like 3000 or whatever. And I think that kind of holds people back from going like, hey, I just need to help people who are like a couple steps behind me. Like I'm not trying to help people who are like ahead of me, right? I think that's really important too. I
I
wanted to
think
touch, oh, sorry, you go.
no, just lastly on that as well, I think something that I very much operate with as well is like I operate my business and I operate Instagram the exact same way that I did with the same degree of like pace as I did when I had 1,000 followers. Right. It's
Mm.
like I so people will probably look at like if you stumbled across my content now, like I still have it in my mindset of like I still punch out this like if you have a look at the amount of content I still do, like yes, maybe it's like it's upped since I definitely have prioritized it. But it's like, even when I only had 1,000 followers, I still was on my stories every single day. I was stuck. I've been doing that for 5 years. People are like, oh wow, you're so consistent. It's like, well, it's literally just become a part of my daily life, which is why people stay in my world for years. And then some people sign on in a day, some people sign on after a year, some people have literally followed me literally since day one. And it's being able to go like just practicing going again from a place of service and duty, but then also going like this, it needs it. I mean, I always think about it, it's like the lifeblood of any business, right? At the end of the day, it's like it needs to be part. If you knew that it was from this that you were going to be able to grow and make impact, it wouldn't be like a, oh, kind of when I do it when I feel like it. It's just, it is part of the job, and it's how I change lives. So it's like it becomes a non-negotiable.
Mm.
um yeah, it needs to be a priority.
Totally. And I think that awareness piece is so important, right? Like so many times I hear people being like, "Oh, well, like, I'm just really good at what I do and people should just find me." And I'm like,
Mm.
"How?" Like like if you're hiding in your house and or you're like, in your corner of the world, how the fuck is someone gonna find you if you are not like you are your biggest asset to your business, you are the person who is the marketer and the sales, especially in the early days. It's like people don't just find you, right? Like they find you when you put content out or you promote something or you talk about it. And I think we've sort of, for some coaches, they're like, oh, I feel like I don't know if it's they think it's beneath them, but I think it's just like, well, I shouldn't have to do that. As
Mm.
opposed to like recognizing like marketing is part of your job to be able to get more eyeballs on what you're doing so they can't trust you unless they know you and then like you.
Yep. 100%. Like, yeah, no one's, and I guess maybe it also depends on niche, but like I would say like no one tends to Google binge eating coach. No one tends to go on Instagram and go binge eating coach. So it's like people don't know that they're looking for me, right? People
Mm,
think that they're looking for a meal plan oftentimes, or they're looking for like some hypnotherapy or like something that's gonna like magically whatever. Like that's what they tend to look for. So it's my job to insert myself in that space so that people that actually are genuinely looking for support can find me. But it's like if I took that standpoint of like, oh, people will find me just by being here and by popping out a piece of content every now and again, it's like I'm probably not going to make the impact that I want to. My content probably isn't going to do very well. Right? I'm probably not going to convert many people. Not going to actually be able to support any clients. It's being able to go like again, like operating as though I still only have 1,000 followers. It's like it's yeah, again, coming from that place of duty of like actually if you are actually wanting to, it's not even grow your business, but like make impact and actually support the kind of people that you want to support and genuinely impact the kind of people you want to, it needs to be a top priority. And yeah, I think it never can be something that in my eyes, I think it's something that I cannot let fall by the wayside, because again, it's like, what if someone's life depended on it? I would actually, because it does, I would keep putting out content.
mm, I love that. And I think for you, it's so much harder, right? Like with me, I come from an exercise background or a rehab background, and people often are like, oh, well, like if they're going to lose weight, they're like, oh, I need a personal trainer, right? Like
Mm.
they jump to that quite quickly. They might also jump to weight loss surgery or shakes or something else. And so I think
Yeah.
even if, the people listening are like, oh, well, like people know my profession or whatever, cool. But also they're comparing you to all the other options that they could have. And I
Yep.
think that's the thing. You need to be clear on your standpoint as to why your option is the option that they need to choose to get the best result, as opposed to the other options out there, for sure.
Totally. And I think that it goes to like learning how to back yourself as well. And like know what you speak to, know what you're good at, know what you're different with and how you coach or teach differently than anyone else. And that doesn't mean that you have to be like drastically different with like some crazy different approach. It's like just being understanding of like you yourself already will be different just like in terms of your content. Like the way that I speak to the same content, like intuitive eating is very different than how someone else speaks to it, even if we're talking about the same principles. So it's like getting clear on the way that you speak about certain things. And then like even within a certain niche, even if it's something that is a bit more, I don't want to use the word saturated because I like don't really believe in that. But it's like, let's say, for instance, a saturated industry, it's like you still can be incredibly potent and you can still draw in incredible people that want to work with you specifically, but you have to like back what you do and yeah, really project that out.
Mm. So good. So good. One thing I definitely wanted to talk to you about was vanity metrics versus like actually what you're looking at, because I think, it's cool that I really appreciate that you've spoken about like I still treat it like I've got 1,000 followers, and like I have less than 3,000. I mean, our other account grew to like 12,500 followers and stuff like that, which is cool when Instagram was like on its peak and it actually, showed you to people.
Mm.
But I think the thing is people are like, oh, well, when I get to X number, then I can become an online coach. Like, particularly in my world, people are like, oh, like I need a bigger audience before I can insert the thing that you want to really do, which is maybe like online coaching in some capacity or a group program or something like that. But I mean, I've got a, pretty successful multi-six-figure business, if I do say so myself, on the higher end of those six figures without having these vanity metrics. What are you looking at in terms of like your insights on Instagram, or what do you track, how often, to be able to basically like maybe hypothesize what is and isn't working to create content that's going to continue to hit? Are you tracking that at all, or are you like reflecting in hindsight being like, fuck, I got a lot of like views on that one?
It's really, really great question. I probably don't track as much as I should. I think our business coaches would be nodding along and saying, but in terms of what I do look for, I think it's when I first had a couple of reels go viral, it was being able to recognize like, oh wow, new eyeballs. But it was interesting because new eyeballs didn't actually correlate to new followers, which was really interesting. And I think that's very different for everyone. So, so I guess firstly to speak to the follower piece, right? Exactly what you mentioned. It's like you can still grow an incredibly successful business without followers, right? Or oftentimes people will book in for clarity calls and become clients, and they work with me for the entire thing, and they never follow me, but they came across my page, right? No, especially for me, people don't really want to follow a binge eating coach, right? You can see who, like, what people follow, whatever. So it's not really something that you tend to follow. So I've never focused on followers ever, which is why a lot of people, when I went full time in my business, people were like, "What are you doing? You're insane." And I was like, "Well, like, no, yeah, people, because all the people looked at were followers to go like, is this substantial enough or not?" At the end of the day, all that I focused on were essentially how many clarity calls I'm getting booked in, how, like, what's happening in my DMs, like how many conversations are people feeling like they can actually have with me, how many conversations can I have with people, so that and how fruitful those conversations. Am I helping, and am I giving free value? Am I helping people feel loved and nurtured and supported in the space to the point that they actually realize that they actually can be supported and break free from binge eating? Like, is that conversion happening in terms of just being able to jump on a call with people, just to be able to understand where they're at, understand if my program's right for them? Like, that was the main thing that I measured. But then now it's definitely still something that I measure now, in terms of like amount of calls booked and that kind of stuff. But otherwise, in terms of like actually having a look on, in terms of Instagram and being able to sort of expand reach and things like that, now it's very much, I guess, again, I don't base much off of it. I just kind of like have my, like, gaze my eyes over it. But otherwise it's, initially it was focusing on views and trying to get like over 1 million views, which is now I guess a bit more common. But then, yeah, it was interesting because that didn't actually correlate with followers initially. It was very slow followers. And I was like, oh, interesting. Like, this reel's kind of going viral, and that's awesome. But there was no comments, there was no saves on that reel. So that was also an interesting piece where I'm like, okay, it's being pushed out into like the world, but also it's not really correlating to much. But it was interesting. And I was like, oh, how cool. But then from there, it's like, then I realized that, okay, if I can, it showed me that I needed to prioritize hooks like that one did. So I was able to get feedback as to like, okay, great, these kind of hooks that are more weight loss oriented, that sort of tap into a different part of potential people that actually want to break free from binge eating. And then having a look at that caption, like being like, okay, cool, it had a proper hook. It actually had, key points where it was pain points. And then it had key desirable points that people wanted to actually, things they wanted to achieve. Then it had a call to action of link in bio. Like, it had basic things like that, going, cool, okay, can I repeat that structure? And can I see how that goes? And like the next couple of reels were just complete flops. And I was like, okay, cool, that was random. And then realizing though that and this is something that I think everyone can really benefit from, my mindset is always, if this was to go viral, what would I change? Right. It's always the same. If this was to go viral, what would I change? And making sure that, like, if I've spoken too much to weight loss, like, I don't like pulling in a whole bunch of people that are focused on weight loss, because it means that they tend to be quite emotional and quite charged. They're not really there for like the deeper work. So I'm like, okay, have I spoken a little bit too much in this caption about weight loss? Like, do I want to actually change this so that if it was to go viral, it would be tapping into the right audience? If it was to go viral, is there a clear call to action? If it was to go viral, would I be proud to put out this content, or would I wish that I'd changed something? And then if I use that almost as a metric, it allows me then to put out, content after content after content that, eventually it does catch. So I went a little bit off track there, but in terms of metrics, yeah, now it's about focusing on, I have a look because I'm now using ManyChat as well. So it's having a look at, okay, like what is the comment section doing? Are people actually engaging? Some are complete flops, and then some do really, really well. How many are being sent, right? So oftentimes like binge eating content, you don't really send it to a friend. You don't really save it for later. But realizing with the certain sort of hooks that I do, realizing that I get more saves and I get more sending to friends. It's more like relatability kind of content. People can relate to it and they want to share it with someone. And oftentimes they're ones that have a bit of humor popped in there, or it's like me dancing on my stories, or I'm looking funny of some kind, or eating a sandwich, whatever it might be. And that tends to be something that someone will send to someone. So those are the kind of things that I focus on, but I never use it as a, at the end of the day, for me, like, it doesn't really matter. It's thinking about, is that actually translating into people in my world that feel nurtured, loved, and potentially supported? And then actually jumping on calls. So if I notice that my calls go up, amazing. Are they the right kind of people? But I think when it comes to like actually going viral, it's about making sure that you're just putting out, you're just watching the views and trying to get as many views so that you actually end up bringing the right people into your space. That was a very long-winded answer.
That is so okay. I feel like the main thing that I took away from that is, I mean, particularly for your audience, people might not even want to put things in comments, but DM conversations is probably, if people are feeling shame around something. So, anyone who's working in an industry where it's like, put your hand up if you've experienced domestic violence, people are like not usually willing to be like, yeah, I'm in one right now. Like, like if their partner saw that or whatever, like it could be a
Yeah.
pretty shitty situation. But I think that it's recognizing that the quality conversations and the conversion of content into those clarity, or those obviously like sales calls, conversations, intro, onboarding, whatever you want to call them, is the metric. And I love that, because realistically, like, you're doing this to bring more people into your world. And so if it is doing that by bringing them closer to you in some sort of conversation, or like they're putting their hand up, they're saying, I want more, I want to hear more, I think that is the metric realistically that matters above all else, above how many saves, likes, comments, shares, views that anything gets.
It's like
And to be
engagement.
reminded. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think, yeah, it's yeah, it goes back to, I love that you've actually pointed that out, because it is super important. It's, yeah, you can get some likes and you can get, I'd say even engagement in terms of like conversations, like how many conversations are you having? Because that's where you're actually going to be able to talk to people, and people want to talk to you and
Mm.
understand what you're about. So even if that's like in your stories, being able to, something I've been doing recently is like even just saying like, tap this, and it's like, that thing that like, you know, create some sparkles on your screen or whatever, or like a high five or whatever. It's like just getting people able to like interact so that you can also see who is interacting with your content, how much are people interacting with your content. It's like that is a better metric than having a reel go viral. Like to a certain degree, it's like how many people are actually consuming your content and are actually there. Like, yes, eyeballs are great and you want that. You want your new eyeballs on your page, but also it's like you want people that are actually coming to your stories, that are coming to your posts, that are saving those, that are actually feeling comfortable coming into your DMs and talking with you. Even if that's popping up a question box, it's like those things are really important as well, to make sure that, yeah, you're like nurturing those people so that they feel comfortable to actually be able to be like, hey, I'm potentially interested in whatever it is that you might offer. Like that's what you really want to be. Like that's part of that. That's why we do everything else, right? Is to be able to have those conversations with people.
Mm. Coming back to the real reason and purpose why we're even on Instagram or whatever platform
Yep.
or social media or marketing strategies that we have in the first place, right?
Yep.
Oh, amazing. I feel like there's been so much juice in this episode. I need to like listen back to it myself and like take notes, because I was just being present and making sure that I was here for you, and for this. But one thing that I like to ask all our guests as like a final question is like, if there's a coach listening who is in business, who wants to level up their Instagram, what is one piece of actionable advice that you could give them to move forward today?
I love that. Mine will probably just be being really authentically present on your stories. which might be a bit different. But
Oh.
I think that's been a really, like, aside from reels and all that kind of stuff, and even just regular content, I think it's something that a lot of people don't play, like, and they don't act enough in that space. And again, maybe it's depending on the kind of consumer, but like it allows people to actually come on to clarity calls and they feel like they know me. They feel like they understand me. It makes my job a lot easier because they know that I'm no BS. They also know that I'm warm and nurturing, but they feel like they've already connected with me because my stories, I'm always on my stories, right? I literally use it as, again, coming from a place of duty for me to showcase my life, my mindset, who it is that I am, what I do, what my daily life looks like. So people feel really welcomed on my page, which makes people feel really safe. And especially like with my niche, very important, but also I'm sure with any niche, right? People want to feel like they know you, they kind of have like the behind the scenes of what you do, so that when they actually do reach out, they feel safe to do so, kind of feeling as though there's already some kind of connection. I think that's a space that is not played in enough. And yeah, I would definitely recommend anyone to actually just be more present on your story. People always second guess themselves. Like, what do I say? Just be you. Chat about the stuff that you love. Chat about when you got your coffee, you had this mindset shift and you were like, oh, you had this conversation with this random person, or someone cut you off in traffic and you handled it well. Like, chat about it. Like, like share, and obviously tailor it to whatever it is that you actually support with. But give people the inside scoop as to why they would even want to work with you. Like, share who it is that you are, because it'll absolutely help along the rest of your funnel as well.
I love that. Sheri, thank you so much for your time today and your little nuggets of mindset and the things that you shift, and the perspective of the being aware of the problem and the pain points. I think there's so much here to take away that you almost can't not double negative, but you can't not improve your Instagram just from like listening to this. So for people who want to reach out to you, or maybe they're like, shit, like the stuff she spoke about with like food, relationship, binge eating, whatever actually resonates with me, where can they find you, reach out to you, have a conversation?
Yeah, come on over to my Instagram, which is ready_with_Sheri, ready with Sheri. And otherwise, I've got my own podcast, which is Time to Thrive, on Apple and Spotify, which you can get heaps of free value and content. And otherwise, link in bio on Instagram, there's heaps of free resources as well that you can come and consume if you are ready to, yeah, if you want any support.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And I'm sure I will be at the Gold Coast soon to actually see you in person again.
100% love it.
Amazing. See you later.
Bye.
Hey, coach, before you go, the reason I do this every single week and the reason we've been able to surpass 100 episodes is because of you. So thank you. We're on a mission towards never seeing another coach leave the industry because they didn't have the skills or the confidence to scale. So if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure you do that before you forget. I read every single one of the comments and share as many as I can. So if you found this episode valuable, sharing it with a friend who might be able to benefit from hearing it would honestly mean so much to me. Until next time, and in whatever you do, move swiftly.